Menteri Luar Negeri Inggris, Yvette Cooper, menyebut Ukraina sudah menjadi bagian dari upaya pertahanan wilayah NATO, meski belum menjadi anggota aliansi tersebut. Pernyataan ini disampaikan di tengah perdebatan mengenai peluang keanggotaan Ukraina dan perubahan politik pemerintahan Inggris.
Yes, and I think, look, a lot of what he was talking about, I think, was referring to issues for us as a party in opposition, because I think it's about the kind of the early response that we had on this, where we should have been faster to call for a ceasefire and also been clearer from the start about the importance of international humanitarian law. And I think that is a reflection really for us as a party, but yes, I do agree with that.
In terms of stronger action going forward,
yeah.
You're saying that conversations still need to be had.
So, I also think we need to have stronger action going forward. And look, we should be clear about the things that we have done. We have recognised the state of Palestine, a historic decision to do that. We have suspended the previous government's negotiations on a trade deal. We have had suspension of all arms exports to the IDF that could be used in Gaza. We have had 4 waves of sanctions, including sanctioning 2 members of the Israeli cabinet and including the most recent wave of sanctions on violent settlers. We've restored funding to UNRWA. We've increased support for the Palestinian Authority for both funding and capability building. We've done the medevac and student evacuations. We've also introduced with Australia and Canada a new international peace fund as well. And we've been strong advocates for the peace process. And I met the Palestinian Prime Minister yesterday, again, to discuss what we need to do the next steps, because I am deeply worried both about what is happening in Gaza and the risk of the 20-point plan running into the ground, and I'm really worried about what's happening in the West Bank with the settlements and the settler violence, some of which is clearly settler terrorism as well, and is a part of a deliberate strategy to undermine the viability of the two-state solution which we believe in. There are 2 areas we've been looking at to go further. I'll just complete that and then let you come back. The 2 areas we've been looking at specifically to go further is around the trade with the illegal settlements and also around expanding the sanctions regime. And again, the particular thing about the sanctions regime is also how that links back to the expansion of the illegal settlements, because when we face the E1 expansion, which is fundamentally aimed at undermining the viability of the two-state solution, be deeply, deeply damaging. We need to have some stronger pressure, some stronger levers that we can put on. The ability we have at the moment to put sanctions on is limited, but we think, and I've been working on this for some time, we think there are areas that we should go further on this.
The incoming PM has said we've got it wrong on Gaza. What do you say to all these things as the current Foreign Secretary? Because I'm aware some of this predates your time.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 issues there. There's the settlement trade, and then there's the wider international humanitarian law breaches. So on the settlement trade, I agree, we do need to do more, and we've been looking at a range of different options as to how we go forward. The new Prime Minister will need to take a final view on those. So I agree, we do need to do more, and I think we are ahead of the EU looking at this. Individual countries may have gone further, a small number of individual countries have gone further, but we are ahead of the EU in looking at this. But the broader point about international humanitarian law, I think, is important, because we've seen a series of breaches of international humanitarian law, not just in terms of what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank, but in other parts of the world as well. Our sanctions regime currently can't effectively be used on breaches just of international humanitarian law. That's what I believe we need to change, and that's what we are looking at how to change, to expand the sanctions regime. That would then allow us to use sanctions in those cases where we have egregious breaches of international humanitarian law, where, for example, if humanitarian aid is being withheld in a really obvious and detrimental and incredibly damaging and immoral way, we would have the ability to then use sanctions in those cases to put pressure on as well. At the moment, we don't have many of those levers. We have our diplomatic pressure, which works in some places but not in others, but we don't have a sanctions lever to use effectively in that way.
Will you be making that point to the new incoming Prime Minister?
We have had some of those discussions, and I'm sure those discussions will continue.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download MetroTV Extend sekarang.